Welcome to One Thought at a Time, where we get curious about what makes us tick. I'm Ian Travers, and today I'm joined with an inspiring person who is the founder of an inspiring podcast. Welcome, Zoe Greenhalf.
Thank you for having me.
It's great. The one thing I love about doing this is that we get to talk with some really, really interesting people. And I know from the conversations we've had already, I've been really looking forward to us having the conversation in public.
Oh, me too. Yeah, me too.
So let's kick off, Zoe. Just tell us how you spend your time.
I love this question because I know that it could go off in so many different directions. But I would say that most of my time is spent in a kind of personal growth space. I love the idea of self-improvement, inspiring other people to look at things differently, changing perspectives. And all of those things kind of led me to starting a podcast called the Mischief Movement.
I love it. I just love the whole image that word conjures up as well.
Well, that's interesting. What does that word conjure up for you?
For me, mischief is kind of, how do we just row against the flow a little bit? How do we maybe just disrupt a little bit? And why did we always do it that way? And so that's what I see from it.
Good. That's exactly the effect that I would like that word to have, because for me it's a bit cheeky, it's a bit playful. There's something a bit disruptive about it, but perhaps it's not, all out anarchy and rebellion. But there is an element of that, an element of disruption, which is important, because I think it's that, as you say, why have we always done things that way? And is there a better way of doing things? And do I need to change something up in my life, And can I incorporate more fun and more play in my day-to-day life?
There's a word which we don't use enough, isn't it? Fun. Yeah. Here I'm sat in the UK. Of course, you're in Italy, and we'll talk a bit about different cultures as well. But one thing we don't use the word fun a lot in life, because you're grown up. Things have got serious now. I like something I saw written on a billboard once. I think it was like on a chalkboard outside a sort of a cafe or something, and it was, "Don't grow up, it's a trap."
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah, I've seen that and I loved it too. Yeah, I mean, I was in a period of my life where it was just, God, adulting is hard, isn't it? I was parent to 2 small kids under 3 at the time, and I just felt like all the fun had sort of drained out of my life. And I was on a bit of a mission to sort of find my purpose in that period. I was like, if I can find my purpose, perhaps that's the thing I've been missing. And in doing so, I sort of fell down a rabbit hole of personal development and sort of growth mindset, which I absolutely adored. I loved it. I felt like, wow, this is all the kind of stuff. This is the culmination of lots of different things that I've been interested in over the years. But I still couldn't find that thing. I was kind of caught up in this idea that I had to find my thing, and I hadn't found it. And so I thought, well, now what am I going to do? It's, I'm just getting frustrated.
Yeah.
And when I actually sat back and looked at my life, I thought, you know what the real thing is that's missing? It's not a purpose. I mean, you can say you're a mum, you have a purpose right there, or you're a partner, you're a daughter. There was always purpose, but I'd lost a lot of the fun that I'd been having. And so with this word mischief, which had already been present in my life in a product-based context, because I was making leather goods with a brand called Mischief and Hide, I was like, I love that word. I'm going to take that forward, and I'm going to make that my guiding North Star. Let's switch the compass from trying to find a purpose and getting frustrated, and just leaning into the things that light me up and excite me, and that will probably lead me to exactly the place I'm looking for anyway.
I think that's brilliant. It's And this for me, and I know this from previous conversations we've had as well. This thing about, if you are not careful, I think we are programmed, aren't we? To you go to school, you do well. Maybe you go to college, you do well. You get a job, you do well. You get promoted, you take your pension, and you die. And yeah, for me, that's it. Just doesn't sound enough. So you swim against the flow a little bit, don't you? And I guess that's your mischief. So you're in Italy now, doing this. How on earth did you get there?
Well, I suppose I've always had a sense for adventure, and I came here looking for that. I moved here in 2010. I was a footwear designer at the time, and I got to a point in my career where I was feeling like it was stagnating slightly, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. But the back of my mind, I'd had an idea to move abroad and learn a second language, something that I hadn't quite managed to achieve at school, even though I'd been interested in languages, hadn't got very good. And I also thought, what is the scariest thing I could do right now in my career? Like, what is the boldest move I could possibly make? And it was go and live abroad, go and find a job abroad, and sort of immerse yourself. And it took a while for the job to materialize, but it happened. I moved here, and I expected to stay for maybe a year or two, learn the language, see the sights, live the culture, and then go home. Except that I unexpectedly met somebody, and now I've been here 13 and a half years, 2 children later. So, it wasn't ever on the life plan.
Right.
How life goes, isn't it?
Well, isn't the thing that sometimes we write a life plan, but then the great thing about plans is they change.
Wow, it's like having a birthing plan. If you speak to any women, they don't mean anything.
Yeah. But no, that's true though, isn't it? I mean, often said, isn't it, from a military viewpoint, once the first shots are fired in battle, the plan is out of date, and that's pretty much like us, isn't it? The younger Zoe, did you ever think about doing that? I don't know, 10, 20 years later, you'd be doing what you're doing now?
No, not ever. No. I mean, if you'd have said, actually, Zoe, you're going to end up living in Italy, mom to 2 children, launching a podcast, I'd have thought you were pulling my leg completely. At that stage, I didn't even know whether I wanted children. I had no expectations of really moving abroad. It was a bit of perhaps that's something I might like to do at some point, but I never imagined I would end up staying here and living here. No.
So what about your early influences? So as you were sort of going through school and sort of the younger Zoe, what was your trajectory? You said you were in shoe design, but what was the trajectory that you were on?
Well, I suppose right from when I was younger, I'd always been labelled as a creative, and I always thought of myself as a creative, and that was my trajectory. I can remember being age 7, sort of primary school, middle school, and being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I'm going to be an artist. I don't think I had the vocabulary to understand a designer, but definitely I was already of the idea that my career was going to be creative, because that's what I enjoyed doing so much. And my parents were very encouraging as well. So it just
were they creatives?
Yes, in slightly different ways. My mum was always making cakes and doing sort of cake decorating and stuff. I know that my grandparents were both interested in photography and things like that. So yeah, I think there is creativity in my family, but they didn't do anything like that as a career. So it wasn't like I was exposed to parents who were full-time artists or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they definitely saw my potential and the fact that I enjoyed it, and went, you should do this, you should keep going with this. And so I did, like all the way through school. I knew that that's where I was going to end up at some point. I just wasn't quite sure which field I would go in, because the creative industries are huge. I did an art foundation course after A levels, which is there to kind of help you work out which path you then take at university. So I was already of the idea that I'm going to go to uni, I'm going to study something in this field. And it wasn't till my art foundation course that I had to really kind of narrow down my choice. And I had a love of textiles and fashion. And then I found a course that was footwear. And I remembered that as I think I was 16 or 17-year-old, I went on a school trip to Florence, interestingly enough. So I don't know if that's where my love of Italy began. It might be.
Yeah. Was that the seed?
It might well be. Yeah, it was like a trip with the textiles department at school. And there we got to go to the Salvatore Ferragamo Museum, who was like one of the most famous shoe designers. And yeah, I think that probably was the seed, actually. And when I saw this course, I remember thinking back to this trip and going, actually, I have a real love for accessories. It's not the fashion, it's not the design of textiles, but it's the accessories. And more specifically, I can even tell you that it's that sense of wearing bold accessories and things that are a bit different. So that's how...
That's the mischief coming out again, isn't it?
Well, it is, but at the time I didn't really think too much of it, but you know how it goes, and you get a bit older and you look back and you sort of connect the dots, don't you? And now I'm looking at things from this perspective of, where's all this kind of sense of rebellion coming from? Why do I enjoy this, going against the grain and doing things differently? And I don't know where it comes from, but I can now look back and see where it showed up as I was growing up. And that was definitely one of the areas, because, creativity is often going against the grain. And this thing I had about accessories was like, I don't want to wear the same as everybody else. I want them to be different. I want to stand out. The first thing anybody ever does when you tell them you're a shoe designer is look straight down at your feet. There is no way that I could ever wear boring shoes.
Oh, that's funny. This thing about you just made me think about something. When I first joined a very, very large, well-known engineering company in the UK in aerospace, as a graduate, I remember going to an induction day, and I was wearing a bright yellow tie. It was at the time it was like a slightly mottled, like you call it, like a knitted tie, a parallel tie. No one else was wearing anything like that. And I remember this senior manager who was presenting to us, he said to me, "Why are you wearing that?" I says, "Because I like it." He says, "Oh, well, you'll be conforming soon."
Oh no!
And that stuck with me. And I've spent most of the rest of my career not wearing a tie.
Oh, brilliant.
I remember hearing something once on Radio 4 many, many years ago. And it was only a snippet because I wasn't a Radio 4 listener. But I just remember hearing this thing that said, the trouble with the city of London, is going back, is that every man goes to work and the first thing they do in the morning is put a noose around their neck.
I've heard that, yeah.
So yeah, I did this disruption thing. I kind of get.
It's funny, actually, you said that. You just made me think back to when I was at university. I joined the Officer Training Corps. So it's like a branch of the British Territorial Army, specifically designed for undergraduates at university. And similarly, we had to all go out and buy a suit, because whenever we were away on a weekend and we were going into the officers' mess in the evenings, we had to wear a suit. So everybody went out and bought their black suits. The boys went out and bought their navy blue suits. And I bought a red one because I did not want to blend in and wear black.
Love it.
There you go, see.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's kind of this almost unwritten rule book, isn't there? And I can't quite describe to you what's in that book, but it's the thing that calls people to give you a double look or a frown or a smile when you do things which are not conforming to that book. Now, I know that book's getting much thicker these days because I think we're becoming more acceptable of a wide range of different behaviours, backgrounds, and all sorts. But I do think it's there.
Yes. Yeah.
Who do you think on your journey? Who were your biggest influences?
That's a good question. My parents were naturally huge influences growing up. I felt very lucky that they were so open-minded as to allow me to choose anything I wanted at university. I'm very lucky that I didn't come from a family where somebody said, all creative careers, no, don't go down that road. No.
There's no money in it.
No. And I know a lot of people who were put off by well-meaning parents. And a friend of mine, she's a glass artist now, but she had to discover her passion for glass as an adult because her dad convinced her to do a chemistry degree. And I remember at the time feeling very lucky that I was allowed the choice, and I wasn't pushed into anything I didn't want to do.
Yeah. I do think that's a great set of circumstances, because I know the number of guests I've had through here who have their influences were very much to conform. I remember one lady, Monica Gazy, who was on the first year I did this, and I remember her dad saying, she's from a Ugandan family, and she said that she wanted to be an engineer. And I remember her relaying the conversation in the podcast, which was, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's not what young ladies of your background do." And now she's a personal coach. So some people
at
just,
the end of the day, anyway. Yeah,
it does. Yeah. Oh, that's really good. So who else? So parents, who else along the way?
Trying to think.
You went to Italy for a visit and then ended up stopping.
Now, there's a person who has had quite a big influence on me. The person who gave me the job over here essentially changed my entire life path in doing so, And I don't know if he ever imagined I would end up staying, but it was somebody I met through my footwear job in the UK. They were our Italian distributors, and right from the moment that my then boss in the UK told me we were getting this other company to help us sell into Europe, as soon as I met them, I thought, right, this could be an interesting contact for the future. And that's exactly how it panned out. As I said, it took a while to get from half joking on my part, it was only half a joke about giving me a job, to actually having a phone call saying, that job you joked about sort of 2 years ago, well, we might just have one now, which blew my mind. And obviously I've been here ever since. And what's really strange is that it's kind of come sort of full circle now, because I was a stay-at-home mum for 6 years, and I only went into the workplace last year, and I'm now back working for him again, but in a different setting. I'm not designing footwear. But yeah, so he's still there, very present in my life, very much likes to think of himself as a sort of Italian father figure to me. And I think he'd be alarmed if he listened to some of my podcast episodes and realised just what a rebel I can be outside of work. But anyway.
Maybe he does listen and knows.
Maybe he knows everything and just doesn't let on. Yeah, he's smart like that.
So becoming a mum, how has that influenced your approach to life?
It's been a massive catalyst for change in my life, and I think a lot of women would probably say the same. But I remember going on maternity leave and being simultaneously excited about becoming a mum and having a baby and sort of what was going to happen there, and at the same time relieved that I could end the job that I didn't like and maybe take that time to sort of pause and reflect and work out where it was I was going to go in life. That was the biggest change. And then I got pregnant with my second child quite soon afterwards. My children have got nearly 2 years age gap between them. So I never went back to work in that period. I was at home then with a baby and a toddler. And that's the moment where I kind of went, actually, wow, where am I going now? What am I doing next? You know, I'm not going back to that job. I was teacher by default. It was, I speak English. There were lots of English teaching jobs out here, but it wasn't something that lit me up. I didn't enjoy doing it. The only part of that job that I truly loved was motivating the students and helping them to think differently. So when I talk about connecting the dots back, that's definitely something that I saw present in my sort of teaching life, but I wasn't planning on returning to teaching once I'd finished. And from then on, it's always been about how can I fit in a career doing and find the things that I love around my kids and making sure that I'm present for them. I was very adamant that I wouldn't accept any kind of job that didn't allow me to be there for nursery pickups and things like that. And so now I'm in the lucky position to have a part-time job, which gives me a little bit of stability that fits around the school run, and also gives me time to work on my podcast and chatting to all these interesting people. So yeah, it's great.
How do you think the moving to a different country and the becoming a mum, how has that played out? How has that helped you help others? How has that helped you in the podcast? How has it helped you with the people that you try and light up? How has that helped?
It's helped me to understand what it means to feel a bit isolated, and I understand better how much life improves when you've got that sense of connection with people. Connection over the last few years has really become such an important value to me, and I think it's because I felt the absence of it. I was connected to my kids, absolutely, but I felt very isolated. Things were done differently here. I wasn't always sure where to go. I didn't know any sort of mother and toddler groups, that kind of thing. I felt really isolated. And I think that part of me starting the podcast was wanting to reestablish a sense of connection and talk to people about similar things, because the problem is when you become a mum, you meet a lot of other mums and you would just end up talking about children all the time. And I just, that's got its place, but I don't want to spend all my time talking about my kids. I also want to talk about the other things that are interesting to me, meeting interesting people who are doing things that perhaps I wasn't aware of, or going to places I hadn't heard of, that's exciting to me. So yeah, I think sort of connection has really come out of the situation of becoming a mum in a foreign country, definitely.
So tell me a bit about the podcast then. So you decided to start the podcast, and you took the Mischief from what you were doing previously as well. What did you want to achieve? What do you want to achieve? What is it that you hope that people take from the podcast?
Yeah, I wish it was as easy as just me saying I'm going to start a podcast and me doing it. But I'll make no secret of the fact that it took me 3 or 4 years to get from having the thought of I'd like to start a podcast to actually starting it, because I had to get over the fear of doing it. And it took me a few years to work out what it was I wanted to talk about as well. And I think that was all part of the kind of self-development journey I was on, trying to work out what is it that I find exciting or interesting, what is it that lights me up, and how can I then use that to create a positive impact. And once I sort of used Mischief as a bit of a guiding point, I thought, well, I'm just going to share this message. This is the message. if I am an adult with children who's feeling disconnected, there will be other adults out there who are feeling disconnected, whether it's with themselves and they're questioning, God, who am I? Where am I even going? Or whether it's, actual sort of isolation and they don't feel like they can talk to anybody who's on a similar wavelength, because that's a little bit of what I was experiencing. I don't know whether it's because I live in a small town and Italy is slightly behind the UK in a lot of ways, but I just remember coming to Italy full of dreams and big ideas and this sense of anything is possible, really. My parents had always brought me up to believe that anything is possible and grab every opportunity that you can. And when I moved here, I really realised that I was the only one who I knew that thought that way. Right. And the funny thing about that was, like, I didn't even notice how that had slowly been knocked out of me over time. I didn't notice. But once I started on this sort of self-development journey and I picked up some books and I listened to some podcasts and I was made to think about things in a different way, I kind of went, wow, do you know what? I used to be that person. I used to think that way. I used to believe all it. Hang on a minute. Well, where did that go? And why didn't I notice that it had left me? Yeah. And I really felt like it was so linked to the people I was surrounding myself with. And I don't mean any disrespect. I know some fantastic people here. But when you're with people who are saying to you all the time, well, you've got a job as an English teacher, like, that's good. Like, you should be really happy about that. And they sort of make you feel shameful because that's not quite what you wanted. And you kind of go, oh yeah, you're probably right. Like, I should be grateful. I shouldn't. What was I thinking to want more? That's what it comes down to. That is what it comes down to. Yeah. I was so ashamed to say to people, actually, I'd like a bit more from my life than this, because I just felt this sense of guilt of, you've got a lot. You've really got a lot. Why are you so ungrateful? And so a lot of the message behind the Mischief Movement is that it's saying, you're not ungrateful. You're probably just feeling a bit unfulfilled. And, there is space to do something about that. It doesn't mean you're not grateful for what you've got, but you are also allowed to want to have an extraordinary life instead of a mediocre one that leaves you feeling a bit there.
And that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because the people that we surround ourselves with can sometimes have quite a limiting effect on us, because I'll go back many years now, when I would decide to run a half marathon. My first half marathon goes back a long while ago now. And I remember people saying, you run a marathon, and it kind of makes you feel, oh, yeah, you're right. Actually, probably. What am I thinking? And it causes you that moment of doubt, doesn't it?
Why would they say that though? Why did they doubt you?
Well, I think it says, knowing what I know now, I think it says a lot more about them than it does about me.
Self in the case, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in general, what I think about where people say things to people, it's more they don't want you to expose something that they really wish they'd wanted to do, and if you do it, you make them look bad. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I think, not all the time, but I do think in a lot of cases, subconsciously, people portray their limitations onto you to try and stop you. And I guess this might be an age thing. I actually just don't care now. I don't care what they think.
I could say the same. The older I get, the less I care about this kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely.
So I was interested when you said it took you 2 to 3 years. What was it you were afraid of?
Well, I was afraid, but I knew that the first episodes that I put out were probably not going to be very professional. I knew I was doing it from a computer, a microphone that I bought on Amazon, some headphones that I bought from Amazon. I knew that I wasn't going to have the studio, the software, the podcast editor to help me. I didn't have any money. I was a stay-at-home mum. I didn't have an income. And that was the fear I had to get over. It was the fear of, this is not going to be perfect and polished. And it's going to be out there in the world for people to listen to and criticize.
Yeah.
And I had to make a lot of peace with myself over that and just say, you've been sitting on this idea for so many years. Are you really willing to let that stop you? Hasn't it got to the point now where you're just a bit sick of talking about it and thinking about it and making notes about it and hypothesizing potential guests? You know, you've bought the stuff, just do it. And that's what had to happen. I just had to say, all right, I'm going to press go on this podcast. I'm not going to judge myself. I'm actually going to just be really honest about it with people and say, do you know what? It's not the best quality of audio, but don't let that put you off, because we're going to have some great guests. And I have to say that of all the feedback I've had over the last year, nobody has come to me and said, oh, do you know what? That audio is a bit rubbish, wasn't it? You know, if I talk to my friends, and I've got people who actually work in jobs related to audio, they'll tell me that they can hear that it hasn't been done in a proper studio. But nobody says that really took away from the episode. I wasn't interested in the guest because I was so busy focusing on that time you bumped into the microphone with your hand. Do you know what I mean?
We tell ourselves some wild, ridiculous stories, don't we?
I know.
We really do. We rehearse failure so many times, and then we get there and it doesn't happen, and everything's fine.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I use that so often to say to people, feel the fear and do it anyway. Just do it. Just do it, because I was always told in every situation when I was younger, Zoe's great. She works really hard, or she's creative, or she's this, or she's that. But, and the but was always the same. It was always, she was just a little bit more confident, that'd be great. And it really used to wind me up. And the only way that I could ever deal with that was, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you what I can do. And so I deliberately picked the things that were hard and do them. And I still do that. You know, I joined the OTC and was a footwear designer by day, and then at the weekends I was off learning how to fire rifles and things, because it felt hard and challenging, and I enjoyed that challenge. And I think everything I've done since then has been about this sense of feel the fear and do it anyway. And comfort zone, what comfort zone?
Well, it's, you know, our brain is really, really good at keeping us safe, isn't it? You know, it's really, really good. It's the thing that will say, oh, don't do that. That little voice in our head where that, you know, that belief that's been really nurtured for decades, you know, when we try and act against it, I think, I mean, many people have written about it. I mean, there's the chimp paradox, talks about chimps. I think Jim Lawson talks about taming tigers. You know, there's many authors have written great things and tried to manifest this voice in our head as something visible. But I like the fact that, you know, what is fear? It's a thought.
Well, the day I learnt about limiting beliefs was a game changer for me, because actually I was able to realise that a lot of the things, as you say, that you think, not actually facts at all. They're just things that you quite often absorb from other people. And once you know that, then you can begin to question your thoughts a bit more, can't you? And think, well,
yes,
where's that come from? Do I actually agree with it? Have I got the evidence to back that up?
Yeah. Where's that story come from? Is that a fiction book or a fact book? And it's nearly always a fiction.
Yeah.
So where's next?
Well, I'm going to continue with the podcast. I'm going to turn it into a mischievous community in whatever form that looks like.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm just looking to build a community around it, I think. That's my biggest priority. just to kind of get the message out there, just to get people feeling like if their lives are a little bit mediocre, they have the power to change them. And there's also a space full of other people who can support them doing that. So that's my biggest wish from the podcast, is that it develops into a community. I'm currently looking at sort of coaching. I'm doing a bit of mentoring, which I love. So that's something I'd like to sort of develop further. I'll just see where it goes, really. But I feel like it's going to snowball on its own.
Yeah.
As long as I sort of stick with it and keep following the things that are lighting me up, I don't think I can go too wrong. And
what
new opportunities are coming up all the time. So
yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That's another interesting thing, that when you do start to follow, I mean, I guess it's, what do you call it? Follow your passion.
Well,
when you do,
I would also say, like, maybe follow your curiosity more than your passion.
Yes.
Because if you can follow your curiosity, it will lead you to your passions. I think sometimes people get stumped by that phrase and they go, well, I don't know what my passion is.
Don't know what it is.
Don't start there. Start by just getting curious.
Love
and
that.
the rest will probably come.
Love that. Yeah, I like that a lot. What is it that lights you up? What are the things that really lift you, energize you, make you smile, even externally or internally? What are those things?
Things like this. Having these conversations, connecting with people on a similar wavelength, sparking new ideas in people. There's nothing more satisfying to me than having a meaningful conversation with somebody, and at the end they say, oh, do you know what? I've got this new idea, or I see that I could do this in a different way now. I love that. That's literally the kind of stuff I live for. That makes me excited. Learning more and more and more, and absorbing myself completely in this world of who could I be if I keep making small incremental changes? Who could anybody be? You know, it's exciting to me to go on that journey and find out what's possible when you sort of live in that world of, well, I'm curious about this and I'm going to just pursue it and see where it goes. So today I could be reading books and listening to podcasts. Tomorrow somebody might throw me a completely different opportunity. And if it sounds interesting, I'll go with it, you know, and I'll worry about how we make it work later.
Yeah, that's detail. That's detail.
No, definitely. You know, lead with the things that sound exciting and get you excited, and then figure out how you're going to make it work.
Love it. So I've got a couple more questions because we've been talking for ages now. I could keep going at this. So on this, the second year we've been running it, we've introduced that guests can leave a question for a future guest. They won't know who they are. And I've got a question for you, which was left by another guest.
Exciting.
So many of us in our lifetime are told, don't do that. Yeah, I wouldn't do that if I was you. Have you ever been told that and then done it? And what was it?
What a great question.
Or even you've been told not to and you wished you had.
No, I was very encouraged to go on and join the army. I wasn't necessarily told to do it, but I tried. I tried for officer training at Sandhurst, and I failed my selection board. And everybody went, go and do it again. You just had a bad day. Go and do it again. And I said, I will not go back, because the things that I was sort of pulled up on or marked down on, however you want to look at it, were things that I felt were so closely linked to who I was as a person. It wasn't about passing or failing a fitness test or passing or failing, I don't know, a leadership exercise. They were really coming in hard on who I was as a person, and I said, I am not willing to change who I am to fit in with them. And Brilliant. So against a lot of pressure, I said, no, that's it. I'm going to walk away from this and I'm going to go and pursue the creative career after all.
Love it. Standing by your convictions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So here comes the last question. Let's assume that we can conquer time travel. Now you get the ability to write the younger Zoe a note and leave it somewhere for the younger Zoe to find. What would you write in it?
Get back to work and stop looking for notes. Who do you think you are? Not really. Well, I think there are a couple of things I would say. I think the first one would be stop worrying about not being the loudest person in the room, because I was always quite quiet. I'm still not particularly loud, but I always used to associate being loud and extroverted with confidence. And because I was constantly told, oh, you just need a bit more confidence, and the fact that I was quite quiet, I put the two together and just went, oh, I'm not a good fit here. I'm not enough. And I would just say, like, now I know that being an extrovert and being confident are not the same. And you can be so quietly confident. You can be so, it's about being able to trust yourself and know yourself. That is where the confidence comes from. And you could be the quietest person in the room, but you still could also be the most confident because you really deeply trust yourself. And if I'd have known that when I was younger, I think it would have helped, because everybody just telling you to just be a little bit more confident doesn't do anything. It doesn't help. It's not helpful. It just makes you feel more inadequate than you already feel. So I think that it's allowing my younger self to understand the difference between being extrovert and being confident, and knowing that, if I could just maybe work on trusting myself and knowing myself on a deeper level, it wouldn't have been such an issue. I think the second thing that I would say is that there's no shame about not fitting in. And that's really hard when you're younger, sort of, especially in those teenage years or earlier adolescence. That's all you want, I think. You just want to fit in. I think I'd just say there's no shame when you don't. I spent the first years of my career as a footwear designer feeling like I didn't fit in because I had all these hobbies that didn't seem related. How many people have you ever met in your life who draw shoes for a living but enjoy going away and being a mechanic in the army at the weekend? It was almost like a joke. It was a joke for the people I was in the army with, because I was like, oh, have you drawn any good shoes this week? And I'd be like, it's my job, of course I have. And then I'd be at work drawing my shoes and they'd be like, oh, you're going off shooting things this weekend? Yeah, I am. Like, why is that so funny? But it kind of was. And I was like, God, I'm not a very good soldier because I'm not constantly doing military things and I'm not fixing my car at the weekend. I was trained as a mechanic. I wasn't there like fixing up cars and stuff. I was more likely out traveling or around a museum and doing sketches for my footwear job. Do you know what I mean? And so even then, as I grew up, there was this sense of, oh, you don't fit here and you don't fit there. Where do you fit? It's like
goes back to that book we mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, and now I just like to champion those people who have lots of different interests and they're curious about lots of different things. If that's somebody listening and that's how you feel, let me tell you straight away that you are not alone. There's probably loads of us, but we've almost been shamed into hiding those parts of ourselves and not really feeling like we can talk about them. And I want to say loudly and proudly, yes, I can shoot a rifle. Yes, I can change a wheel on a car. Yes, I can draw a shoe and have it sell into a retail store on the high street in the UK. And I'm not ashamed anymore of the fact that I have all these different interests. This whole thing about being a jack of all trades used to really upset me. That's how I felt. Oh, I'm a jack of all trades. I can't do anything like one thing really, really well. But now I'm at a point in my life where I think, why would I want to just narrow my life down to one thing when there's so many opportunities and experiences I could have if I was just a bit more open to the idea that, you know, you can draw, you can run, you can go off and learn a new sport, you can do all kinds of things. You don't have to fit in that little box.
I love it. And that's great. It reminds me, some very, very dear friends of Jane and I's moved to New Zealand many, many, many years ago. And before they went, they gave me a present, which was a little tiny plaque to go on the wall. And the words, amongst other things, it said, it's about life. Look through every window, open every door. And I thought, yeah. And that plays to what you've just said there. Yeah. Zoe, it's been a joy. Will you come back for another episode?
Oh, I would love to. Yes. Because
I can see that we'll have to pick a topic and actually pull it apart, see if we can throw some mischief at it.
This one thing, I can't do it. I'm just told you that.
So, Zoe, thanks ever so much for being my guest today. Look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So you have been listening to One Thought at a Time, and our guest this week, Zoe from the Mischief Movement. Please do go check out her podcast. And if you have been, thanks for listening.